I buttoned my upper buttons today.
Wow, we're best. We love.
Hopefully.
Welcome to Bummin Out with James, provisional title. This is part of the Bummer City Historical Society's Oral History Archive, which is just kind of getting off the ground now. I'm James Ikeda. I'm here with Wendy Eisenberg, the inimitable Wendy Eisenberg, whose brilliance cannot be overstated. Hello, Wendy.
Hi.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So I've got a few questions here. So Wendy just put out a tremendous record called Otto, which is getting all kinds of wonderful, well-deserved positive press. And so I'd like to talk about this record. I would also like to talk about you as an artist in general. And I think I'll sort of begin with the latter. So my first question here, you know, I've known you for a number of years now, and it's been interesting and a great pleasure to see all these, you know, developments of the last few years. It's been sort of dizzying and in fact quite difficult to keep track of all of the wonderful things. So could you, just to start us off, how would you periodize your career, for one, and like if you were to divide up your career into a series of different sort of important times, how would you divide that up? And moreover, is career like the appropriate or resonant paradigmatic vessel within which you would arrange your work?
Wow, unbearably sensitive question, perfectly phrased. So I guess I wouldn't periodize it. I would kind of like resist that urge because I think like, well, I mean, I have PTSD and that's kind of like made linear time no longer fully accessible to me, which I wouldn't say is a gift at all, but like is notable. And I feel like as much as my career or like explorations in music or whatever could be like charted, it would have to be more horizontal than that. Like it would have to be like a little bit different than like I first started out playing rock and then I played jazz and then I did this and then I did that. Because everything for me, like I really value simultaneity. I feel like simultaneity without juxtaposition is like what I'm kind of going for. And because then people can juxtapose, like they're free to juxtapose how they want. It's kind of a very modular approach to forging an artistic path. So by that I mean like at the same time that I'm writing songs, which is what nominally Otto is, I have to have an improvisational practice where I play like freely improvised music or music that has an improvisational bent, like jazz adjacent musics, noise adjacent music. And then at the same time as that, I have to have a rock band. And like, then before COVID, I would also try to tour with bands as like a guest person, but that was a little bit more for fun. And I'm a little bit too, my playing is, I could be more versatile. Like the more I've refined my voice on the instrument, the fewer gigs I've gotten as like a session guitar player, is what I mean. But anyway, so that's the answer to your first question of like, how would I periodize? But like, which is to say I wouldn't, and I would like organize it into like 3 or 4 like covalent expressions of art, or of like the way that I relate to the guitar, which is mostly my project. And then the other question is, would you consider what you're doing a career? And I think that's really hard because yes, like I approach it with the fervor that I assume that somebody who's normal would approach having a career that would actually earn them any money. But like, I can't say that I want my life in music to have the stench of careerism on it, because I feel like as much as I love to be challenged and in dialogue with my friends who are also doing this work, I would hate to be competitive and kind of would want to opt out. And to me, I think maybe this isn't true for everybody, but the word career kind of like has a sense of competitiveness on it. That said, I'm in it for the long haul and I'm like committed. I just don't know. I just feel weird about the evocation of like the economic into an artistic practice, because maybe I'm just kind of too idealistic and I want to steer clear of one corrupting the other, you know?
No, I mean that's perfectly fair and makes absolute sense. I suppose the question that comes out of that then is, and this it may not be all too interesting actually to explore, but I guess the question would be like, to what extent would, in as much as these kind of gross notions of careerism will come up in terms of the way one makes decisions, and sort of I guess the question is are in the abstract anyway, like what is your comfort level with those kinds of compromises, or is that even relevant for you and how things have actually unfolded?
I mean, it's relevant. Like I think like any job that I've had that isn't music knows that I care about music more than it, and then it inevitably fires me or I quit, you know? So there's like just the practical matter of how I like earn my keep. And but yeah, I don't know. I feel like in listening to that secondary question, it's tough because like I feel like I missed something essential that you were asking, but that's not your fault.
No, I think actually it could have been about twice as long and somewhat more specific in that, when I should specify that you and I share a kind of feeling about careerism.
Okay.
And I think that asking the question, I think the other thing is that what I regret about that is that asking the question, do you consider this a career, could in most contexts be like a profoundly condescending question, which is in no way sort of
It doesn't sound like that from you.
But I'm glad to hear. But I think we're on the same page there. It's actually maybe it's a funny paradigm which is prevalent in the lives of artists and which people have to relate to in different ways, but
Right.
which, I don't know. But yeah, I think your response is perfectly legible.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I feel really funny about it because I think the most important thing for me is to resist the obligation, like what I feel obligated to do, and to as much as I can under the way we live, and just to do things I want to do. And by that I don't mean to like live indulgently or whatever, as if that were even a bad thing, which I don't think it is. But like I don't want to feel like I'm making any concessions in my art in order. And I feel like a career, like I don't know if it implies concession, because I don't think it does, because people can have careers without that. But I feel like it is dangerous to enter into the notion of a career without any consideration towards what you feel like you should do versus what you actually want to do. And like I feel like we're forced into doing a bunch of stuff we don't want to do at all times anyway. So like it's super, I don't know. I feel like any sort of career in the arts is a becoming minoritarian impulse. And like I feel like it's kind of the flouting of what's obligated of us, or like what's put on us as an obligation. And so calling it a career, I mean, it's like it's very useful shorthand, especially like around when I'm talking to my family, like I am a career musician or whatever. But like, if I'm supposed to live out those practices, I would hate for it to seem like I'm obligated to like generate content or like whatever like dark shit you can put on to the impulse to make art, you know?
Sure, and for what it's worth, I mean, I can imagine, I can only imagine the sort of experiential complexity of threading that needle, but from an outside like fan perspective, it sort of seemed like you've been wildly successful in doing this the right way, because at no point in the last few years did it ever seem like you were making like compromised decisions in terms of what you wanted to do with your time. And that's sick. And that's one of the reasons why it was such a joy to see the last few years kind of, because it really just seems, as I said, like you've done it right and true to your principles, and have been able to
You don't have, there's no way you can know how much that means to me to hear, because I feel like there's a myth, like a transcendentalist myth of like the ethical artist. And like you can make the argument that by touring I'm destroying the earth, which I've made to myself out of guilt nonstop. But like aside from like these weird little like habitual unsustainable things that are like part of the music lifestyle or whatever, and I'm really grossed out that I said lifestyle, like I feel I feel like to have somebody that whose ethics I care about, like yours, and like who's made such a difference in their community, like just to have them like believe that the work that I've been doing, like kind of haphazardly and messily on my own, like resembles an ethic that you can stand by, it feels amazing. So thank you.
Well, and I appreciate that, and it's also, I mean, maybe it has something to do with the fact that, yeah, like I mean, having an ethic in a way that means anything is probably much less about the quite well articulated plan which you lay out in your my next 5 years Google Doc than it is
Oh
about
boy.
you sort of like like being I mean, not to like sort of fetishize like natural whatever, but like sort of what you're sort of driven to do, right? And sort of following that, pulling on that thread. Just gonna give you
Yeah,
yeah.
good of you to point out the fetishization of the natural, because I feel like that's what leads to a lot of very boring music.
Oh my God, yeah, and boring everything really. So I actually I have another there's a follow up that sort of emerges here, which is, I mean, this phrase, and correct me if I get but sort of simultaneity without juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think this is a really, really useful way for me as a fan to think about your practice. I wonder, what is how does audience fit into this, into that?
Ooh. I mean, I don't want to seem like an asshole, but I almost rarely consider the audience. Um, because I feel, well, that's not even true. I don't know. I guess like there's a practical concern that when I get booked on a gig, if I don't know the person who, like personally, who's booking the gig, there's a real chance that they're going to be very disappointed if I end up doing like free improvisation when they expect songs. And so there ends up being sort of like a pragmatic thing where I have to be like, well, what of my work have you heard? Which presupposes that they even know that I have these other dimensions to my work, which often they don't. So it's kind of, there's like a weirdness of audience there where it's like about expectations and about what they might desire from me as a creator that I never really think about until it's like almost too late. And then I have to like play this show that I like maybe could or could not have prepared for, you know? But on the other level, like I think about my audience in the sense that I want the music to affect them no matter which direction the music is pointed or oriented towards. But and I have enough belief in my sincerity and dedication as a musician that it will kind of transcend and hit at least somebody in the audience at this point. But really when I'm creating with other people, like in rock music and improvisation, or totally by myself in the composition of a song, like it's kind of like a tracking of, like, it's just reminding me that I'm alive in a way. Like if I'm not writing, there's something, even if I'm like having like a writer's block thing, like I usually know that I will write in the future. But if I'm not writing, that's like a fucking problem. And so like it's kind of about that. But I also should say that the separability, or what did I say? Simultaneity without juxtaposition is kind of coming from a totally gross misreading of the Denise Ferreira de Silva difference without separability thing, which I don't want to speak more to because I don't know if I understand it yet. But it's kind of coming out of like a gloss on that.
Actually, that's a nice segue. So my I guess I've got two kind of questions that are related, and you can take whatever element you want of each, right? So one of them is, I'd be interested in just hearing a sort of general, if I may, sort of intellectual genealogy of Wendy, right? Like sort of where are you? Because I think this is something which one of the things that struck me the most about you, which I don't know if like how clear this is to other sort of components of your audience, of your fandom, if I will, like that you struck me first as an intellectual, right? And it's very clear that you have there are things which you puzzle out and think about a lot, which have a huge effect on your art. I'm curious if you could just trace some of the developments intellectually. And then the other question, which is related to this, is, do you consider influences to be a meaningful organizing principle for understanding an artist? And I guess, if so, to think about that, if so, what metaphorical form does it take? Like, is influence like you're a ball in space that's nudged in a certain direction by influences, or is it like an ontological thing, like a chemical reaction, or like, I guess, like, are influences that useful for us? And the intellectual genealogy question.
Okay, huge question. I feel like I'm gonna have to go back to some Foucault or something to answer it properly, but just with respect to the genealogy thing, I guess like whatever critical thought that I've applied to my art has kind of stemmed from two classes that I took. I went to music school only, but before this year, I'd only taken 2 humanities courses in my life in college, and they were this one taught by Jason Peck at U of R, University of Rochester, called Nietzsche and the Nietzscheans, which kind of traced the lineage of Nietzsche's influence as a thinker on things from like Heidegger and like, I don't know, just like the generation of continental thought, basically, which kind of got me into, it kind of introduced me to like people like Deleuze and Spinoza and Bergson through Deleuze and I don't know, that kind of world. And then I took another class later actually on genealogy that was co-taught between Peck and he was the Nietzsche teacher, and also this guy Josh Dubler, and they were talking a lot about affect theory in that, which led me to like Eve Sedgwick and Lauren Berlant, and I don't know, I'm just like looking at my bookshelf to like make sure that I'm right, but yeah, so I like those 2 things, and I guess I took a few other classes, but none of them really had the same impact as those. I mean, I took a Jewish lit class. It's all coming back to me now. I totally forgot. But like that kind of totally dictated the way that I read fiction for like the next couple of years. But anyway, so I've always been like super curious about this because I feel like it's my duty as an artist to go as deep into the interests that grab me as possible. And the thing about critical theory and modern thought is that they have these juicy titles that like really seem to speak to a musician's impulse, like writing indifference or difference in repetition or cruel optimism, like, or anything about the postmodern. Like all of that shit is so seductive. And then you get to me, and other people, but I can't speak to that. And so I kind of like started to get into this like philosophy bent because it seemed like they were the only people who were taking music very seriously outside of the idea of it being a trade or a career or a way to gain some sort of internet popularity. And they weren't ever direct about music. So what I would end up doing is creating these like unbelievably personal subtextual readings of philosophical work that probably were like wrong, but like extremely generative to me as an improviser, especially. But as to the notion of influence, I mean, a useful metaphor for me has been tanning the hide, but I haven't, which kind of speaks more to the ontological proposition that you had raised. But I feel like everything you hear and every entanglement and every book you read, just all of it like goes towards the shaping and coloring of the you that creates or exists or anything. I don't think you can be knocked off course the way that like the other metaphor of this can suggest, because that would presuppose a course, and I think we're beyond that now. But like I think I don't know, it's weird. For influences, like there's people that I listen to every day, but like it's pretty indirect, you know? And I feel like that indirectness allows for me to be more sincere to my creative impulse rather than a recapitulation of what they've already done.
For sure, and actually, this leads perfectly into my next question then, which is, is there a historiographical component to your work, right? Like, as in, who is your work in dialogue with, and what forms does that take, if anybody?
It's tough because when you ask that, I feel like flattening what I do into a lineage. But if I'm being honest about the structuring and like the like honest within the moment of creative generation, and this sounds maybe this is a little vulnerable, but I think it's actually it's in relation to the divine. And by that, I mean, kind of the extemporal. Like, I could be totally clearer and say that my work kind of exists at like what I hear in João Gilberto and what I hear in Judee Sill, what I hear in Jane Siberry and Prefab Sprout or whatever. But like, if I'm really examining the moment, like those aren't the problems that I'm solving when I compose. Like what I'm solving is like, I used to be concerned with solving problems in my lyrics, but now I just say whatever I'm feeling at the time. And that's been a little bit like, To His Sense is just like essentially a diary. But what's weird is like in the diary, there's opacities that like I couldn't have planned. But when I'm thinking musically, it's just like, I'm not using technique, and I might be trying to make things a little self-consciously difficult, but I'm really looking for sounds. And because of the non-visual nature of sound, like I really do feel like I'm reckoning with something beyond my understanding, which mostly speaks to the visuality of our culture. Though I think in my early writing, I was more satisfied with patterns that looked beautiful too on the guitar.
This is I mean, a thread I don't necessarily want to go off on in terms of like me speaking, because I don't know where I'm going with it. But it's really interesting hearing you talk about this, because it sounds like, so I don't know, I'm being sort of at this point, my interpretation of all this is inflected by the fact that I'm back in grad school, and I've been reading about like the kind of historiography of cultural history and of like the cultural turn and whatever. And so I'm like, I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in the last few days is how the sort of intellectual harvest of the great epistemological crises of the 70s and 80s was reaped in sort of mainstream culture much later, but with like none of the interesting stuff or none of the nuance. Mm-hmm. And it just seems...
Delivery.
Oh, wonderful. Hi.
So much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Richard.
Oh, pleasure to meet you. I'm James.
Hi. Rock on.
Heck yeah.
See ya.
Thank you for the coffee.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Sorry. I hope that's okay.
It's complete. It's wonderful. So yeah, I guess I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's just refreshing because you the way that you talk seems like, even though, I mean, despite all the kind of like deconstructive and postmodern elements of your thinking, it's like not to impose a structure on it, but you seem like someone who is self-conscious about or at least appreciative of where we've gotten so far, you know, and understands that, and is not willing to like you're not framing your understanding of yourself as an artist in like mid-century terms, but in sort of terms that, you know, I don't know. Yeah.
I love that you see that, because sometimes I feel, because I'm actually also in grad school right now, so that might explain the highfalutin way that I'm talking, but like I feel like maybe I've actually always talked like this around you, especially because you let me. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't necessarily always understand things like I don't feel like I would feel comfortable saying that I understand the epistemological crisis of the 70s and 80s, even though I have a familiarity with what you're talking about, because I was in jazz school for so long, where if you don't know exactly what you're talking about and you can't play exactly what you're talking about, you're kind of treated like shit. So like that kind of rigorous idea of like definition, plus like a healthy relationship with like Saul Kripke's naming and necessity, like has made it really difficult for me to be like, yes, I know that. So like the fact that you can perceive that I have a pretty, like, for lack of a better, maybe contemporary view of what it means to be an artist, like through these like philosophical lenses, feels really encouraging. Though I feel kind of funny like copying to it or something, because like I know it to be true, but like outside of these couple of classes that I took in undergrad, like my theoretical knowledge and philosophical knowledge is almost entirely self-generated. And like that could seem impressive, but mostly just makes me feel very lost.
Well, and look, I mean, to be clear, someone who's read like 3 or 4 more books than I have could easily just call me a sophist and like I don't know anything and whatever. I mean, this is just sort of what it is, right? But
Yeah, we're all afraid of our reputations.
yeah, no, exactly. And I think, yeah, I don't know. So I think we're very much the same boat there, as is kind of everybody. Although possibly controversial that last bit though. I don't know.
Right.
My professors seem to know what's going on, so I think whatever. Okay, so my couple of things here. So this is more specifically about the record, which by the way is it's so phenomenal and such an accomplishment. And I just maybe more to the point, I love it. I love listening to it. It's very good to listen to. So like to what extent, and you kind of touched on this earlier a little bit, but to what extent do you, and in what ways do you differentiate between a song and a recording? Because like, one of the things about this was that I love this record because I saw these, or most of these songs solo, and I think a kind of oft said thing about them is that this is like, it sounds like the songs, but more, right? Like it's sort of this is the pure and more authoritative form of these songs, but also saying it that way, which I'm being gratuitous intentionally, feels like something which you would recoil from. So I'm sort of or I don't know, but so I'm curious. Yeah, like is it a matter of the recordings like being iterations of the song becoming, or are these things separate, or what?
Well, I conceive this is like the first time I've ever made a record where I can say that I've made the definitive version of the songs. And that to me has less to do with that the songs needed to eventually sound in a specific way and more to do with the beauty of collaboration. Cause I'm pretty private about this shit. And like Time Machine and Dehiscence were recorded alone, like to a fault. But like, and then I let somebody mix Time Machine for vinyl and like remix it, which I really kind of needed, but like it was still totally alone. Aside from that, this like I let my friend Nick Zanka, who's the best producer, like I let him in on the secrets of the song and the form and the technique and just everything. I kind of just told him how everything worked as much as I was able to. And he extrapolated, like he's so fluent in production that like he could just go with that. And we would use reference a little bit, but like really the reason that these have the feeling of songs but more, or like songs but definitive, is because they have another voice that's like affirming some aspect of the song. And I think that like people really miss that when something's produced, it's no longer that like potential thing that you hear in the more demo-y format, because it's already in a dialogue, and what they're hearing is a dialogue. And what I've noticed in my relationship to theory and my relationship to the world, especially the world of like, I guess, reviews or press or something, is that if somebody's in dialogue with something, it makes another person want to be in dialogue with that dialogue, and rarely the other thing. And it's to Nick's credit that his production is so transparent in addition to detailed, that like you can hear the detail that he's doing, but he almost disappears and lets the song be more audible. So what you're hearing when you hear the discussion between us that's represented in the recording is less like a review of the record or something, and which is impossible, I think, in production, though I feel like maybe Jack Antonoff's appeal lies in that he's like reviewing it as he's doing it, but that's another spicy take. But like, and more in the fact that like there's another hand, another ghostly hand on the hand that wrote the thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That is that, and that's a. I'm sorry, I'm like processing.
Yeah, no, that was a lot. I mean, the thing is, nobody really theorizes about music out loud ever, and so like when you like start, it just it can come off pretty funny, because then you have to actually be like, what? But like, I really do think I think about Nick's contribution a lot because I think he's a genius, and like I really think that what you're hearing, and aside from like the ridiculous solitude of the lyrics and like their generation and the guitar sound, is like someone comforting someone else, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love your description of collaboration because, I mean, and I think it can be up up to listeners and watchers to sort of tease out how that connects to earlier things in the conversation. But I think there's a lot of very interesting resonances, and I would, yeah, I don't know. Sorry,
No,
I'm normally much relatively quick at processing things, but this is actually quite a novel. Uh,
honestly, I feel like I'm just making it up for the first time out loud. So like I'm right there with you.
well, I mean, I think perhaps. Well, I mean, one interesting thing there is thinking about you as an improviser, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you seem very, very open to exploration, which is such a vulnerable thing to do, and in front of people. And thinking about that on an intellectual level, I mean, that's like one of the most important things that is missing from a lot of the way that we talk about anything. Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. You should keep going.
no, that's just that's something I've thought about in other contexts as well, and it does seem like I mean, I guess like I remember a long time ago, a friend of mine who studied classics in undergrad, we were talking about the format of debate, and her basic argument was that like debate is the only thing that is good about debate is that it's generative, right? And that's the one thing that people don't really care about when they're like following a debate, because you want to, right?
You wins.
Exactly, right? So like you are in fact the only valuable thing about it is a liability in how we sort of we think about the value of it, which is a serious problem. Like if you're going to have a debate, you should just be there shouldn't be a goal, there shouldn't be a destination, and that's really interesting. But if you're debating towards that destination, it's like it's a useless format then.
Yeah. Super relevant because like when Nick and I collaborate, we're not looking for a dialectical summation between our approaches. And like the urge towards dialectic or telos or anything is like it's kind of a flawed one in creation because it implies that you're making a product or something. And then like that kind of makes it enter into the market, and then you make these weird obligational considerations that I was mentioning earlier. Yeah, no, that's fascinating.
Well, look, I said I was going to keep you short time, so I don't want to keep you a long time, but I do have one final more concrete question for you.
Okay.
Which is like, and this is something I'm just personally interested in people. Do you have like how much does routine play into the way you lay out your day, and do you have like a breakfast routine?
You know, that's so funny. I feel like that's a question that gets asked of artists a lot, don't you? When I think that's because people are trying to figure out, and this is not me being shady at your question, which I will eventually get to, I promise. But like, I feel like people ask this of artists because they want the artist's lifestyle to seem as regimented as the lifestyle, the very routine, heavy lifestyle of somebody like my sister who works for the IRS. So like, which is hilarious, but true. And if you, right now, everybody's sort of against routine in the sense that like everything has been upended and there's been like a lot of dead people, and like there's just so much casualty and like protest and subversion of routine. But like for like a long time before then, there was like the Fordist view of routine, like machinist kind of stuff. And then there was like this like non-routine neoliberal routine of like being permanently accessible, so that like even if you weren't like, even if the routine wasn't as like machinic as saying like you wake up at 7 and then you like do your thing at 8 and then whatever, like you still have the routine of like compulsively checking your email and then responding to it, which like might not be a routine situated in time, but it's definitely a habit in a way that kind of smacks of routine aesthetics. But digressions aside, and I'm sorry for that, I mean like I drink coffee every morning, and that's a routine. that's kind of newer. I'm kind of agnostic on any substance except for like some, but yeah, I don't know. It's tough. Right now I'm teaching guitar lessons and I'm in grad school. So like on the days when I have class, I like wake up a certain time, drink my coffee, and then like sit in front of the computer for a while and then teach lessons afterward also on the computer and then whatever. But like because of the atomization of my lifestyle, which includes grad school, but also moving to New York and also moving like my whole social scene into a different color. Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't really feel like a routine-y guy. Like I'm a Sagittarius. Like I'm a mess. So I just like write whenever I write, and then I like eat whenever I eat.
That's a wonderful answer. And actually, I really appreciate all the lead-in, because one of the reasons I asked is I mean, just imagine me. So where I'm sitting at my computer, I have a gigantic whiteboard that I have all my to-do list stuff on. That's like just to my left. And so I was sitting here like a couple weeks ago, like writing a paper on discipline and punish, and just looking at my day that I break up in 30-minute increments, and just being horrified and trying to like let all that settle in. So it's you know, I mean, I've long sort of sought a kind of comfort and stability and warmth and niceness in my routines and in my know. But there's also obviously a kind of sinister side to that, which is increasingly difficult for me to ignore.
I feel you, and I feel like that's a thing that grad school and like reckoning with Foucault's ghost would definitely allow for. But like, it's very weird because like comfort is, or routine is comfortable. Like whenever I'm having like an angsty time, which is like more often than I'd care to admit, I'll like call my mom and she'll be like, why don't you just like have a routine? You need a routine. Like you're not routine enough. And it's like, maybe she's right, but also like she's definitely the product of like disciplined societies. And like, I don't even know if control societies are like where we're at. Like, I don't know if like Guattari is talking about now. I think he is. But like, we might even be beyond it. And I'm also not trying to claim some sort of minoritarian identity by saying that since I don't have a routine, I'm like above something, because that's really fucking dangerous also. I just know that for me, like in this, like I have changed my life pretty profoundly over the course of the last 3 months, for the better. But also like, it's been so much that like, if I were to try to get a routine out of it, it would probably not hold because it's on very shaky ground right now. So like that comfort doesn't really feel super accessible to me. So I have to find a sort of comfort in the fact of my like everyday coffee, which as you can see, because it's 12:40, like is not a regular timed thing, you know?
Well, I'll tell you, I've got a lot of things to think about now, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat, and it's just great to see it. So,
oh my God, Sam, we should do this in a off script way.
I would love that. And, and or yeah. No,
Right.
no, I was going to try and crack a joke about having it be because I've got quite a minimal. I've got a couple of talking points, but then I was thinking about what it would be like to have a maximally scripted conversation, and then there was nowhere for the joke to go, so I just stopped, and then I explained it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I don't know how to edit videos, so that's going to have to stay in there. But thank you very much for taking the time. And Otto is out. It's Bada Bing Records, yeah? Mm-hmm. And I know that the vinyl is sold out, right?
The limited edition yellow one is.
But there's still the other one.
The other one, yes, we have a bunch. And what's cool about that is I think that non-colored vinyl sounds better. So.
Whoa. Okay,
yeah.
So definitely, and that would Bandcamp be the place to make that purchase?
Yes, I know that this music is on Spotify, and I'm doing that because I didn't fight with my label hard enough, or at all, because I love them and I don't want to be difficult. But Bandcamp is the way.
Buy on Bandcamp, buy the vinyl, support Wendy, and
if you can't afford it, just I have an email address on my Bandcamp. So, or on like, if you just Google me, my email address will show up somewhere. So just like reach out.
Incredible. Well, and really, please do. If anyone who's listened to the record on Spotify, please do go on Bandcamp and buy it there. And again, right. If you can't, there's other ways. But it's important to be supporting artists, and I think what you're doing is really important. And I hope that that you're adequately supported by the people who are your listeners. So
I feel that way, and I'm really grateful for that.
That's so wonderful to hear. But thank you very much, and I hope you have a really wonderful rest of your day. And let's talk soon.
Yes, please. I'm at your disposal. I'm so stoked that you reached out. And hello, everybody.